Welcome everyone to the Ask an Architect show. Here with me today, Anna McCorvey. Anna, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you on the program. Anna, let's just get right into it. Let's kind of get the quick rundown, the 15-second overview of who you are and what you're doing right now.
Great. So, Anna McCorvey, thank you for having me again.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm an architect here in D.C.
Mm-hmm.
I'm currently working at Cox Graae Spack Architects,
Okay.
where we primarily focus on educational facilities, but they do a variety of projects.
Okay.
And just a quick background,
Sure,
a quick
please.
story.
Yes, ma'am.
I actually approached architecture through housing.
Okay.
Public housing to be more specific. And it really struck me how different that particular housing type looked from the rest of the housing types. And I've basically been on a path to understanding that and trying to combat some of the inequities that appear in housing. And I've basically just been using architecture as a medium to do that.
Let's just start right there because I think that's really interesting. That's a rather deep analysis and personal reflection in terms of your personal passion in the profession. I can't imagine that was something that you had at high school and in your first couple years of college. When did that form and how did that thought form?
Well, that was actually very early.
Okay.
I had to have been probably about 5 years old when I first
Wow.
started noticing just those differences between
Sure, that's when the
housing types.
observations
That's when the observation happened, exactly. And I remember not even really having the vocabulary at the time
Sure.
to understand how to ask those questions of my parents, to
Sure.
understand what I should be doing to better understand the problem. So it actually happened at a very early age.
Okay.
Didn't discover architecture actually though until
Gotcha.
high school when
Okay.
I took a 2-year drafting vocational course.
Okay, and that's when you realized that there was potentially a connection between this personal social interest of yours and a way to combat that or a way to
Exactly.
solve those types of problems.
Exactly.
Great. So that's a fantastic kind of background and overview and a quick kind of deep dive into your thought process. So let's start where you are now and work back a little bit. You recently, very recently, took on a new position. Can you tell us what was, why did you decide that now was the time to take on a new position? How long were you at your previous location and kind of what led to the transition?
Right, that's a great question. And I got asked that question a lot throughout the interview process.
Sure.
Because my previous firms focused on affordable and low-income housing.
Okay.
That was like our bread and butter. We were
Okay.
really good at that, did a lot of renovation work.
Okay.
So it fit perfectly in with kind of my broader understanding of architecture. It
Okay.
fit perfectly into my graduate school degree as well. And I was there for a little over 4.5 years.
Sure. So a substantial amount of time.
It was a nice amount of time. I think it's a good amount of time starting out actually with the first job.
Good advice.
And so my decision to kind of relocate really just kind of it stemmed from me really wanting to be a well-rounded architect. Wanted to work on different building types. Wanted to work in different team structures. Just really trying to get a good overview of the profession as best as I could, but while still working with a firm that focused on building types that had some sort of social purpose, like schools.
I think that's very self-aware of you because, I mean, you're getting to the point now where you're kind of starting to round the corner on the early part of your career and kind of entering the middle phase. And I think that's when self-awareness and knowing oneself is critical because you're really starting to develop an expertise and you really want to make sure you're driven by passion so that when you get to the latter part of your career, you're starting to actually make significant changes and you have all the connections and the skills and the knowledge you need to do what you want your life's purpose to be.
Exactly.
So let's go back to the early part of your career now and tell me a little bit about your early strategies for getting a job because I know a little bit about it and I think you had a really unique approach and I'm curious as to how that turned out for you.
Right. So when I graduated from graduate school in 2012, wow.
2012, okay, yeah. Handful of years ago now.
Yeah. I moved back here to D.C.
To D.C., okay.
And, I sent the resumes out.
Sure.
Just typical, sent the portfolio out. It was just typical. I wasn't getting as many bites as I would like.
Sure.
So I decided to hit the streets, so to speak.
Now, set the scene for us. 2012, the recession kind of hit 08, 09.
Right.
Where were we in 2012? Were things picking up, or was it still pretty slow across the board?
They were picking up slightly.
Okay.
They were picking up slightly.
Not to the point where people were hiring left and right, though.
Exactly. No, not
Okay.
quite. Not quite. They were picking up slightly. And so that was kind of another reason why I thought to myself, I maybe need to do something a little different to get my face out there.
Sure.
So I printed resumes. I had portfolio samples. I would carry about 10 of them with me a day, and I would have a list of architecture firms. This is the list of firms in McPherson Square that I'm visiting today. And I went door to door.
Door to door.
Door to door.
Okay.
And it was in the summer.
Yeah, and for those that don't know, DC is nasty in the summer.
Yes.
It's a sweat bath.
Yeah.
So walk us through some of the reactions. Actually, let's go into your first one. The first door you walked in. Take us back to that scene.
I'm trying to remember the first door.
What was the most first memorable door?
The most memorable. So the most memorable, actually there were two. One was very, very pleasant.
Okay.
I had a gentleman, very positive. I had a gentleman who quickly invited me in, had small practice.
Okay.
Quickly invited me in, was, I'm, glad you came by. Unfortunately, we don't have any positions, but, what is that you have? That's your portfolio? Let's sit down, let's look at that.
Wow.
We talked.
Okay.
He gave me a list of contacts at some pretty big firms in DC and was like, feel free to reach out to them, let them know I sent you.
So he gave you other connections.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that was very positive.
Okay. Let's flip it over.
Maybe not so positive. I want to say negative, but not so positive.
A more challenging scenario.
challenging scenario.
Yep.
Walk into another big, I call them big shiny firms.
Okay.
The ones that you see their work on the front of the
Sure.
magazines. Same deal, my resume and my portfolio, and the receptionist looked at me like I had two heads.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't quite know what to do with me.
Never seen that before.
Never seen that before in her life, apparently. So I was like, is there anyone here that I can talk to about a potential job opening? And she kind of paused and picked up the phone. Let me see. And I don't know who she talked to, but she was, everyone's out right now. And I said, well, can
Everyone
I leave my
is
information?
Out. How convenient.
Right.
Yep.
At an architecture office. When is that ever?
Yeah, right. Wow. Must be a big on-site day.
Yeah. So I asked if I could leave my information. She said fine. So I left my information. And that was probably the strangest interaction. But they were all a kind of a variable between those two.
I could imagine that. So where did you end up? What did any of those actually pan out, or how did you actually secure your first position?
So none of those actually panned out.
Okay.
I would say I made some contacts, some pretty valuable contacts as a result of it, but nothing actually led to a job. I actually got my first position back through a friend of a friend, basically.
Friend of a friend, so connections
the
again.
The networks are so important. And I met this particular friend at an event here in this building. It was a NOMA event here in this building. And I met that friend, and he put me in contact with another friend who worked at that firm.
Yeah, we hear this time and time again. We're at, episode, we're in the high 30s now, and almost everybody emphasizes connections and network, whether it's a job scenario, a commission, some other unique opportunity in life. In some cases, we've had two scenarios, husband and wife that have met through architecture. So there's always something. Those connections are huge. And in particular, I want to emphasize that because for us, the AIAS is a great way to build that network. And you're a unique guest for us here because you were previously on the board of directors for AIAS when you were in school, the Northeast Quad Director while you were at Howard. So going back, looking at that experience now, you're 7-8 years past that. How did that experience shape your career? How did your AIAS involvement help you become the architect you are today?
Another great question. I always tout the value of AIAS to students, to undergraduate students, even to graduate students. It's a great way to not only build up that network, which is super important, but it's also a great way to understand how other students are learning, what their learning environments are. I feel like students a lot of times, and I know because I was one, would kind of complain about, we don't have enough of this in the building, or we don't have enough of that in the building. And it's good to see that, you have that same issue too, or you don't have that issue, how are you dealing with it? Just to get some camaraderie outside of your university into other university systems, I think is really valuable. I think the opportunities that are presented by AIAS are pretty invaluable as well. I've served on a number of AIA committees. I served on a couple of visiting teams,
For the NAB.
a couple of NAB visiting teams, which is a great experience. And you don't typically get that kind of exposure unless you're like linked into AIAS in some capacity. So just understanding the value and the opportunities that you have and what that has done for me as a professional, I would say. Architecture is global. It's not just U.S. So it gave me kind of that vision and that insight that, hey, this is going on, all over the world. It gave me a better appreciation for the craft, really.
That element of access, whether it's access to a network of other students, an access to behind the scenes at a school, how accreditation works, or access to professionals in the global network. I'm glad you said that, because I think that's a huge benefit, and it's a huge value to the organization, and it's an intangible one. It's not something that we can put up on the website and say, look at all of these great networks that you're going to create. You have to kind of be part of the organization and experience it yourself.
Right.
Well, that's fantastic. Kind of keeping with the school, theme here, do you have any advice for folks who are maybe entering their last year of either undergrad or graduate, and they're on the kind of cusp of graduation, looking for that first job? What advice would you give them as they're about to enter their last year of school here? Any tactical advice?
Absolutely. Definitely don't wait till the last minute.
In terms of sending out resumes, developing portfolio?
In terms of sending out resumes, I would say if you're in your last year of school, I personally feel that resume should have been sent out your last year, your year before last.
Oh, wow. Okay, so junior year?
To start building those, just to start building those connections, to start building those relationships.
Awareness.
Because while they may not have a position for you right then, you've sent that resume out.
It's a great point.
You've kept in touch after you sent that resume out. And now you can follow up and say, hey, I have 6 months to graduation. Can we begin this discussion again?
Yeah.
So that would be my first piece of advice. Definitely don't wait till the last minute. And remember that we're in a design profession. We're designers. When you send your work out, it should look like you're a designer. Like, think outside of the box. How does your portfolio
100%
look? How is that thing constructed? What are the different kind of media outlets that you can be using as well? YouTube's out there, and Facebook is out there. So many sites where you can build your own personal website now. Like, really start thinking outside the box of how you present yourself.
Yeah. I think those are both fantastic pieces of advice. I love the concept of getting out there early and almost maintaining a relationship and building awareness. It's not just sending a resume, getting that one hit, and getting the job.
Exactly.
Because, like you said, sometimes, they're not sure what they're going to need. They don't know when they're going to be ready to hire. So, that hiring process could be quick or it could be delayed, whatever it is. But if you're on their radar, and they know they have a good person waiting in the wings, that could be a real advantage.
Exactly.
I love that. Let's talk about living situation a little bit. Are you from DC? I know you went to Howard University.
I was born and raised in Mississippi.
Mississippi. Okay, so south to DC, and then you spent graduate school out in California. So let's compare. You were in the Bay Area around Berkeley, and then DC. Those are kind of two hubs of architecture that a lot of people might end up working in. How would you compare and contrast those two places in terms of living and working in those cities?
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm an East Coast girl at this point.
Okay.
I love it over here. I would say in terms of approaching a job, it's the same.
Okay. So professionally, very similar.
Approach it the same, right?
Okay.
In terms of cost of living, it's actually kind of similar too.
Sure, DC is actually one of the highest places in the country. We all know about the Bay Area.
Exactly. So in terms of living, cost of living, I would say it's about the same.
Okay.
I consider the West Coast to be a little bit more laid back. I don't really want to say that they're maybe more design focused, but I feel like there's a very high emphasis on design.
Okay. More artistic, more of an artistic culture.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
There's a high emphasis of design here as well, but I feel like also kind of technical capabilities here as well. So those are probably the two main differences that I saw when I was there.
Sure.
But definitely, approach, like I said, approach your career and finding that initial job in the same way, regardless of where you are.
I think that's great advice. Approach it the same way, but yeah, you're going to notice different environments socially, and
Right.
maybe in terms of design-wise, or what kind of building types you're
Exactly.
doing. But
They're very much into kind of participatory design processes and those social design projects and things like that.
And what you said about the technical aspect rings true. We've obviously had a lot of guests on this show, and most of them here in DC because that's where we are. And now that you frame it like that, I can see where that technical side is emphasized here in the city. Okay, so last question, Anna. Kind of let's dive into like personal realm a little bit. What is out there right now that's exciting you, that's keeping you curious, keeping you interested, whether it's a podcast, book, movies, entertainment? What are you doing outside of work that really kind of lights your fire?
Gotcha. What am I not doing? Is kind of the question.
So keep it well-rounded. Keep a broad spectrum of fun things going on and stay balanced.
In terms of reading, I'm reading some sci-fi novels.
Sci-fi. I would not have
fiction.
pegged you for a sci-fi person.
I love science fiction.
Okay.
Yes,
Any good
I do.
recommendations in that realm? What's the best latest book, podcast, movie you've seen in that world?
Well, this isn't a new book, but I definitely recommend it.
Yeah, give it to us.
It's a trilogy. It's the Dune trilogy by Frank Herbert.
The Dune trilogy. Oh, that's an old school one.
That's very old school.
Yep.
But
Okay.
I really enjoy that one. I would suggest it to anyone. It's a great read.
Great recommendation.
The universe that he creates is very detailed, very elaborate. Like you can like dive into it immediately. So that's one thing that I'm really into.
Okay.
I joined a group of like-minded sci-fi geeks.
Really? So this is beyond reading a couple books on your nightstand, watching a few movies here and there.
It's a little bit beyond.
It's
that.
beyond Netflix and chill. It is gone to the personal realm.
I've dived in on it. Yes.
Hey, if you're gonna go in, go all in. It's good. Well, Anna, thank you very much. I think your perspective is really useful and valuable to our audience. I think they can probably relate in a sense that, again, you're kind of rounding out the earlier phases of your career, but also you were well connected while you were in school with AIAS. You've been in multiple cities here, and you clearly have a colorful thing going on outside of work with this sci-fi fascination. So, Anna, I want to thank you for being on the show today.
Thank
it
you
was
so
a
much.
pleasure, and we'll see you
here.
next time on the Ask an Architect show.